Welcome back to the Old Soul Millennial channel. In today's video, I'm going to restore this wooden toddler bench. Now, for the most part, I don't like social media. I don't like the Facebook, I don't like the Instagram, I don't like the Twitter, don't have any of those accounts. I'm an old school guy. Old Soul, that's why I named my channel the Old Soul Millennial channel. However, there is a little bit of good that comes out of the Facebook. The marketplace, but in addition to the marketplace, seems like most townships now have a Facebook page titled like free give and take, right? So if you have an item that you no longer want and you don't want to throw it out, you can post it on the free give and take page, and somebody that sees value in that item can now take possession of that item and, if they so choose, restore that item, which is fantastic. Great way to upcycle and keep things out of the landfill. So my wife was on the free give and take page. She saw this toddler bench. She asked me, hey, can we grab this and restore it? I said, absolutely. So here we are. Now, this bench, the wood is shot. It looks like it was originally oak or something like that. So we're going to replace the wood with like a #1 grade pine. Picked out a nice 2x4, nice and straight, tight growth rings. We'll add a coat of paint to that, should be fine. The cast iron legs, great shape, just needs a coat of paint. Picked up this can of Rust-Oleum for free recently, so we'll see how this does. It's a metallic, so it should give it a little sparkle. And then there's a piece of threaded rod that ties two legs together, 1/4 inch. I think it's a little chintzy. It's a little bit loose, but I would like to upgrade it to a thicker diameter piece of threaded rod, so we may have to drill some larger holes in the legs, but that's my plan. First thing we need to do is to disassemble everything and take some measurements. So before I remove the wooden boards, I'm going to replace this piece of threaded rod, 1/4 inch. Ideally, I'd like to go to 5/16. I don't have 5/16, so we're just going to upgrade to 3/8. We'll mark the new piece of threaded rod just a little bit longer than the old piece of threaded rod to account for the larger nut size. So here's a little tip when cutting threaded rod or bolts to make the bolts shorter. Try and install a nut on the section of bolt or threaded rod that you plan to use, and you run this back over the cut section, and it helps to reshape the threads. So you see how I was cutting pretty square, and then the last little bit kind of broke off sideways. I was trying to prevent that by holding the other section of rod upright, but we'll spin the nut off. You actually can go back and forth over this a few times, and it really just helps to straighten out the threads, and it definitely makes it a lot easier to reinstall the nut. So we have to drill the holes on these legs a little bit larger to account for the larger threaded rod. Now I'm going to share with you a tip I've learned over the years. So it has to do with the settings on your drill. So on a standard drill such as this, you normally have 2 or 3 settings. On this drill we have a standard drill mode, we have a screw mode, and then we have a hammer for hammer drill, which that's when you're drilling through masonry units. Now the standard drill is a direct drive between the motor and the drill bit. There is no clutch. So if the drill bit catches, really catches, and you're still holding down that trigger, the drill will continue to spin so long as it has the torque, and it might quite literally break your wrist. I'm sure it's happened to many of us many times. So what I've learned to do over the years, as opposed to using the standard drill mode, I'll switch the drill to the screw mode when I'm drilling through metal. And now we have the clutch setting engaged on this drill. And this is typically used for when you're driving wood fasteners into wood. So if you look at the collar closer to the chuck of the drill, there are a bunch of numbers. And if you don't know anything about this, these are basically clutch settings. So setting #1 is the lightest clutch setting. So imagine you had a really small wood screw that you're trying to drill through the wood, but you don't want it to strip, right? So if you set it on setting 1, this will allow a little bit of rotational torque, but it'll stop when it hits a certain torque, right? So imagine you're drilling that little fastener in. I'm going to start applying friction, and now the clutch is slipping. So again, that'll allow you to drill that little wood fastener in a little bit, perhaps set it all the way, hopefully without it stripping. And you have to play around with this setting to get it right for the fastener you're going to use. Now if we turn this all the way up to 16, that is the strongest clutch setting. So I'm going to spin this, and I'm going to start applying friction to the chuck. And takes quite a bit of friction for that clutch to start slipping. Now this clutch setting is fantastic for when you're drilling through metal, because if that bit catches weird, as opposed to the drill continuing to spin, that clutch engages, thus protecting your wrist. It may take you a little bit longer to drill that hole, but you're protecting your wrist, and I think that's more important. And also, when we're drilling through metal, we should be in a low gear, especially thick metal. I was in 2, I really should be in 1. You heard that clutch engage, so that drill bit was really digging into the metal, but the clutch protected my wrist and it prevented the drill from spinning all the way around. There it goes again. Great feature not many people understand. Check the hole size. Beautiful. Do the other side. Let's install this new piece of threaded rod. Try and get these legs plumb and the threaded rod square. Now the outer nut, I'm going to ensure that I stop to ensure that threaded rod is flush with the nut. We don't want any sharp objects protruding at the end of this threaded rod, so I'm going to tighten this on the inner nut. Focus, you fuck! After upgrading that threaded rod, the bench is much more stable. Mind you, all these boards up top are barely fastened on here. In fact, backboards are just slid right in there. So, yeah, let's start taking off the rest of these boards, I suppose, and then we're going to have to rip down that pine 2x4. I don't know, it's a rusty number 3 Phillips at the top, and it's a 10mm nut at the bottom. We'll see if they come off the easy way. Alright, there's a chance. Contact. Now, as I move through a project, I always like to clean up my mess. I'm a type A person. I like to have a clean environment. Helps the job to move along because I'm rarely fumbling around looking for the next piece that I need to assemble my project. Anyway, the point I want to get to here is I used to use a dustpan to sweep up my steel workbench. However, as a millennial, somebody who's taken so many safety classes and is very aware of environmental hazards, I found that dustpans tend to kick up a lot of dust. So as opposed to using the dustpan, I now use this 2-foot wide scraper. This is for like finishing mud on drywall. But I use this like a hibachi chef would use to clean their big cooktop surface. Guess it's called a griddle, right? I don't know, but they're pretty large. Anyway, this is really effective, and it does a great job at keeping the dust down. Here's 2x4 I'm going to use. I'm going to rip it in half, then rip each half horizontally in half again. Then we'll just have to cut the boards to size. Well, I tell you, it's really starting to look like something. You know, initially I was thinking I was going to paint these boards white, but now I'm really digging the natural wood color. So I might just end up putting a coat of poly or clear on these boards. I think that in conjunction with the metallic black spray paint that will be sprayed onto the cast iron pieces, I think it's really going to pop if we leave it the natural wood color. Anyway, as for the strength of these pine boards, I mean, for a toddler, they are plenty strong. If an adult goes on here, well, hopefully they go to the ends. You know, the center, there's a little bit of flex, but I think that'll still support me just fine. Anyway, because I ripped up a 2x4x8, it left me with 8 ripped up boards, pieces of wood. So I selected the 6 higher quality pieces of wood. The 2 rejects are down underneath the bench. But I positioned everything strategically because, you know, 2x4 has natural rounded edges from the factory. So there's a natural rounded edge here, rounded edge here, rounded edge here. And I also marked these boards in numerical order as well as their orientation. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and arrows pointing back and up. So that way when I go to reinstall everything, it goes in the same order. Now, if anybody out there is working on the same project, restoring, you know, an identical bench, I cut my boards 3 feet wide. Additionally, as for the screw holes, they are set 1.5 inches in from the ends of the 3-foot long boards on center. So as for drilling these, it's going to be very simple. Just go 1.5 inches in on center. Now, as for fasteners, I had these 1/4 inch carriage bolts laying around. Yeah, this is coming along real nice. Let's mark this out and we'll drill these holes. And here's the finished product. Pretty pleased with how everything came out. I'm a little disappointed with that Rust-Oleum paint. Doesn't really have much of a metallic sparkle to it. Aside from that, if I'm being hypercritical, I have a small knot right there, which that kind of bothers me. A little one right there too, but I mean, what do you expect from a piece of pine from a big box store? Aside from that, cut off the ends of the carriage bolts. They're a little bit sharp on the bottom. It'd be nice if I had cap nuts kind of close off the bolts on the bottom side. Maybe that's something I'll have to look into, but aside from that, looks like I got to change out the blade on my miter saw. You could see the numbers a little bit, but I think that adds to the human touch. You know, to be honest, I try and get things as perfect as possible, but I think it's kind of cool when they have some imperfections. Anyway, I'd like to thank you for watching. As always, we'll catch you on the next one.